Tom Campbell here. I and MBT Events hope you like this video. It was made possible by donations from our supporters. If you're one of them, thank you so very much. If you're new to MBT and find something of significant value in our videos, please consider supporting their production through our Patreon account or through a one-time donation. It would be very much appreciated. The links are in the description below. Thank you.
All right, Tom, good afternoon. We're here today to answer questions from the last live immersive that you had. A few people didn't get to ask the very final questions. So let me start with Vera from Sweden. Here's her question. I would love to hear Tom's view on evil and its parts and evolution in the LCS. I'm aware that both light and darkness, yin and yang, are needed for balance. I'm also aware that we need duality for our learning and growth, and the free will daily choices between good and bad, growth or decline. But if the system works and supports growth and its goal is love, how is it that evil seems to grow and be supported as well? Can it really be that evil souls around actually are doing us a favor so that we can grow from slavery and misfortunes? Or is it that darkness and evil is also growing and evolving fractal as there is no duality in source LCS? And it makes no difference between good and bad. Also, watching only from Earth's perspective here and now, how is it that evil souls and systems seemingly has had the upper hand over the last hundreds of years, considering corruption and deceit and all of the things that come with evil? To me, it seems to be the winning team here on Earth. How would you respond for that?
Well, that starts out with some assumptions that are just wrong. There is no balance between good and evil that is required. The system does not support evil, and no, evil isn't here just to give us something bad to experience so that then we can experience the good. And no, it doesn't take evil for good to exist. It's like, well, if there wasn't evil, you wouldn't know what good was. Well, that's silly. We are here to evolve and become love. We are here to get rid of our fear, and evil is because of fear. If there was no fear, you wouldn't have any evil. If the fear creates the ego, the fear creates the beliefs. From that is where, negativity springs from that fear. Evil springs from that negativity. So the system doesn't support that. And yes, we can evolve to a whole world full of very caring, giving, happy, fulfilled people who are cooperative and caring and have great compassion for each other. We could do that. That's not impossible. That's well within our ability to do. In fact, I will go so far to say is it is inevitable that we will do that, because that is the course of evolution. We're evolving to lower entropy consciousness or higher quality consciousness. So eventually we will get there. It may take another millennia or two, or maybe only another century or two, or maybe only a couple of decades. It's hard to say how long it will take, but we'll get there, because evolution, though slow, very slow, is also relentless, very relentless, and it just keeps chugging forward. Even if it has setbacks, it then just turns around and keeps chugging forward. That's the nature of evolution. Okay, so we will get there, and we have been getting there. It's not true that it looks like evil is on the winning side. We have been getting there very obviously over the last 500 years or so. Now, all the time up to the last 500 or the last 1,000, or what do you say, the last millennia, everything up to that point looks like it was pretty much the same for what, we've been around 200,000 years. So, 190,000 of those years, it stayed pretty much the same. Warlord mentality. The coin of the realm was control, power, and force. And a lot of our world is still doing that. But there's parts of it that are not. And before, it was all doing that, except for little bubbles of enlightenment here and there that rose up, did their thing for a while, and then got crushed by the negativity. They were very small, but now we have lots of that going on. It's not just little in the margins anymore. It's grown to be much, much bigger. So life is kinder and gentler than it was even 500 years ago, much gentler and kinder than it was.
There are still elements of this going on
Mm-hmm.
in taking new forms. Would you say necessarily that these same de-evolved consciousnesses return and try to keep a hand in?
Well, the same de-evolved consciousness return with the idea of evolving, of digging themselves out of the hole that they've dug for themselves with their poor choices. And sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. And if they don't, well, they get to try again. And if they still don't, well, they get to try again, and so on. So eventually they do, because they see the value in evolving in a positive direction and not de-evolving in a negative direction. They see the limitations of evil. It's not even an even playing field. On the positive side, you can evolve, that much. On the negative side, you can only evolve that much. And that's it. Because after that, your own fear, negativity, your own ego and beliefs start to destroy you, tear apart. So the evil is unstable. It can't evolve, it can't de-evolve, but so far. As it de-evolves, or as that evil grows, then it gets to a point where it dies under its own negativity. It's not a stable thing, whereas the positive side just keeps building and building and building and building, and it doesn't have a limit. It continues to build where evil continues to self-destruct. Look at just look at the history that we have. All of those, warlord mentality structures, social structures, it started with, kings and queens and warlords and people who ran and made all the rules for everybody else. Those things are unstable. They don't they don't last very long. They get run over. Eventually, all the peasants get up and overrun the person that's oppressing them. It's, that's what I mean by it sows its own destruction. It sows the seeds of its own destruction. Eventually, if everybody hates it, then somebody will slip poison in that guy's food. Somebody will, hit him over the head with a rock. Somebody will do something because everybody hates it. It's just unstable. You can't build something that's stable that lasts very long.
Would you say that's a high entropy solution or a low entropy solution to rebel against that?
Oh, well, it depends. You see, if you drive people to fight what hurts them, well, I would say that's probably a low entropy solution, but it just depends on the circumstances and what's going on. Sometimes violence is the right answer. Not very often. It's a very rare circumstance, but sometimes violence is the right answer. It lowers entropy. This is not a pacifist philosophy. You have to be able to defend yourself. that is part of, that's part of who we are. You
I
can't
guess it
just
depends
roll over.
on sure. I guess it depends on the motive. Is it harming the majority of the people?
Hmm.
Is it about others, or
Yes,
is
you
it
can,
about self and power?
sure, you can look at the long-term entropy reduction and see. You just look, if you can imagine the long-term entropy, and if it's going to be much lower because of what you do, then what you do is defined as a good thing. Now, it has to actually be that way, not just you think it's that way, because a lot of people fool themselves into thinking, well, I know what would be good for us, and what do they call it? Eugenics. Where you're going to make the world a better place by eliminating all these people and just having these genetics. But if you look at that long term, that's a negative. That's a negative thing. Even if what you're trying to do is breed people who are smarter, faster, better, that doesn't work. It unbalances things. It makes too many people the same. If you look at the result of that and all of the people that you deny existence to in order to get your favorite kind of person, if you look at the long haul of that, it's very negative. It's very high entropy. We need diversity. We need all different kinds of people. So people might say that, oh, I'm just trying to improve the race and improve humanity, and it's a wonderful low entropy thing. Well, no, it isn't. That's just a belief they have, that they think it's going to be a good thing, but it's actually a horrible thing. It's a very bad idea that raises entropy because they have ego and beliefs that are convincing them contrary
Well, it's
to
against the nature
that.
of reality too, and according to your
Exactly.
theory, reincarnation or repeated life experience packets are necessary. So eliminating a particular race here doesn't make any sense at all. It's
Mm-mm.
diversity that rules this reality, and that
Exactly.
person is going to come back as that person they were fighting against.
Hmm.
So it's a
Very
little bit
likely.
of a ironic
Hmm.
twist. Um,
Exactly. They're very likely to come back as that person that they were trying to get rid of, to help them learn, you know, the value of life and the value of diversity. So, in any case, so it has to actually decrease entropy in the long term, not just somebody believes it does. There's all kinds of people who believe all kinds of nutty things. And sometimes they go off and do horrible things based on those beliefs. But just because they believe it doesn't make it a good thing. It has to actually be true that it lowers entropy in the long term. So anyway, the answer to that question is we do not have to balance good with evil. That is not the case, and we can evolve to a society of lovely people who are all helping each other. It's the possibility. In fact, it's inevitable. We will accomplish that. It just may take a bit longer for us to get there.
all right, thank you, Tom. I hope that answers your question, Vera. Next question comes from Saul, and Saul simply asks, "What is freedom?"
Well, the shortest question I've probably ever had. That's very short and succinct. Um, I'll try to give it a short and succinct answer, although it may be impossible. Tom hardly ever gives short and succinct answers. Freedom is very much tied to decision space, which is tied to our free will. Okay, so freedom really comes from free will. And a measurement of free will, is decision space. In other words, a measurement of decision space is a measurement of what choices do you have. So, and it's only a measurement of the choices you have. There may be many choices, but you're unaware of them. That does not count as your decision space. All the decisions that you know that you could make, choices you could do. Okay, now that's decision space. So think of what's a minimum decision space. Well, you can make a choice just between A or B. Just that's it. Or to do or not to do. That's it. But for all humans, humans can always express their free will in whatever decision space they have. So sometimes we have limited decision space. Let's say we've been, we've been naughty children and we get, sent to bed, or for adults, we get sent to jail. And if we're in jail, now we have reduced choices. We can't go home at Christmas, we can't just, talk to our friends and family. We can't go out and take a trip to, see the sights. We're in jail. So we lose freedoms, but we still have choices. We have choices of what to do with the time we have in jail. We have choices that we can grow and not grow from those choices. You see? So a person, let's say we have a slave. A slave still has choices of what to think and what to feel. Now, maybe he does not have the choice to express those thoughts or those feelings. He may have to keep them to himself, but he still has the choice to have those thoughts and feelings. You see? So even if you make someone a slave or put them in a closet and lock them in there, or whatever you might think of that takes away freedom, the consciousness still has a finite decision space because it's conscious. That's the definition of conscious. It's an awareness that has memory, and it has a free will choice. Now, those free will choices may be very small. If you happen to be locked up in a closet, it may be very small, but they're there. So freedom is basically your decision space. You have the freedom to decide. That's what freedom is. You have the free will. The free in free will is the freedom that Saul's talking about. So it's a matter of how much freedom do you have or how little freedom do you have? What's the size of your decision space? So you're locked up in a closet, then your decision space is small, but it's not zero. If it goes to zero, you're no longer conscious. You can't think. There's nothing going on, and you're either dead or you're in a coma. You're not thinking. So, and in a coma, we don't know whether the consciousness is not thinking or not, because it's only the avatar that's in the coma. The consciousness is still aware and still has choices. It can say, well, this coma is going to go on until the avatar dies, so I'm just going to leave now and start another lifetime. That's a choice, you see, that could be made. So even in a coma, the consciousness has choices, because just because the avatar can't think doesn't mean that the consciousness can't think. So freedom is not something that is you're either free or you're not free. Freedom is something that's more than a 1 and a 0. Freedom comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. You always have the freedom to think and to feel what you think and feel. Okay, now.
When you were speaking, Viktor Frankl and Nelson Mandela came to mind. Those were people that were severely restricted in their freedom, but did so much with it.
But did so much with it. Absolutely. There is almost no situation in which you can't grow. In almost any situation you find yourself in, you can make good choices and evolve and grow, even if your choices are very limited. You can do that, yeah. And Nelson Mandela, spent a lot of time in a prison, but he didn't use that time to get angry and then want revenge afterwards. He used that time to grow and to evolve the quality of his being. And yes, that's, that is just the nature of consciousness. And we as players of avatars, we have that ability to grow here. So freedom can be a lot. And when we talk about, well, this country is free and this country is not, What we're really talking about is this country has more choices. You have a larger decision space in this country and a smaller decision space in that country. There's more things you can decide to do. So if you live in a country that has laws and those laws are upheld, then those laws kind of define what you can do and what you can't do. If you do things that are illegal, then you'll be in trouble. If you do things that are legal, then the system cannot get you. Depends on what's legal and what's not legal. So a legal system that's abided by is something that provides a definition of more decision space, things that you can do and things that you can't do. So our sense of freedom, what's freedom and are we free? Everybody is free to some extent to evolve and grow and make good choices. So freedom isn't a thing that you ever end up with a zero. If you had zero freedom, you'd have zero decision space, and that means you would not be conscious. You would be dead. So if you're not dead, then you have some freedom. Use it wisely. Use what freedom you have wisely. Now, if you happen to live, let's say, in a country where there's a dictator who makes all the rules and can change the rules whenever it suits him and do whatever he wants because he's the dictator and he dictates what everyone else has to do, well, then you don't have so much of those freedoms. You don't have that much decision space. There's certain things you can't say, certain things you can't do, or it'll lead to, being thrown in prison or killed or some other terrible thing. But that doesn't mean that you aren't free to think your thoughts and, be who you are and to evolve. You can still do kind things to other people. You can still be, grow toward becoming love, even in that situation. You're just limited. There's certain things you can't do. Now let's take it even a step farther. The more you evolve, the more you develop your intuitive side, the more you develop your beingness, you at the being level, the larger your decision space comes. And now it's not only choices you can make in this reality with this avatar in this physical reality, but now you have choices in a larger reality. You live in a larger space. So your decision space just grows. As you evolve, your decision space evolves and grows. And that's true even if you're living in jail or living in within a dictatorship. As you evolve, your decision space evolves. But there's just certain places it can't evolve to because, the laws don't support you, say. So you can't go there, but you can go into the non-physical and into the intuitive space and start developing that. And there's a very rich space in which you can make choices there. So that's available to everybody, even if you're a slave or in jail or live in a closet. You can still evolve the quality of your consciousness, your mind, and your ability to interact within mind space, within consciousness. That's always available, even if you're quadriplegic and all you can do is lie in bed and can't move. You can still explore mind space and you still have all your own thoughts and feelings.
I hear there's a lot of freedom in Tom's Park.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to do in Tom's Park. Yeah, there's a lot of things a lot of choices that you can make in Tom's Park. As a matter of fact, that's what makes it useful. It's a very choice-rich environment. There are so many choices that you can make. So that's all is what freedom is. Freedom exists because we have free will, and we can have more of it, a bigger decision space, or less of it, a smaller decision space. But everybody has more or less decision space. Every individual's decision space is his own. And you can live in a free country and have a little teeny decision space. And you can live in a dictatorship and have a pretty expansive decision space. It just depends. Now, the avatar may be very constrained in that jail or in that dictatorship. But most of life doesn't really require that avatar to do things as it does require him to be things. The being things isn't restricted so much. It still could be restricted some, but it's not restricted as much. So that's what freedom is. It's your decision space, big, small, whatever it is, and it can grow. So, or it can shrink. As you de-evolve, it shrinks. So as you de-evolve and get meaner and less friendly and more self-centered, your decisions shrink.
So free will is freedom.
Yeah, free will is what gives us our freedom.
Very nice, Tom. Let me go on to the next question. Uh, this These two questions came from our Polish audience at the last immersive and were presented by Andrzej. In both past and present wars, are there any souls unaware that they are dead? If this is so, what is the process of retrieving them? And how would the Free Will Awareness Unit be returned to the IUOC?
Well, no, that is not the case. There are very, very few souls, if any ever, that can't seem to find their way to taking on another lifetime, to going forward, to going on with their growing process, their evolutionary process. The system is set up so that when you die, you very quickly end up in a another virtual reality where you get ready to go back and have another experience. There's a little point in the system. There'll be little purpose in the system for having you sit out for long periods of time. The whole point is for you to evolve, and you evolve through experience. So if you're sitting out, in limbo, not having much experience, not having a lot of choices because your decision space is very, very small, then that's not optimal. Why would a system, be that way if it had any other choices? Well, it's a digital, system. It's consciousness, and it can be however it wants to be because it is the system. So it would not be that way. So it's designed not to be that way. So when someone dies, then they very quickly are in that space where they start planning on where they're going to have their next experience packet. So it isn't true that people die and are confused and don't know where to go, and they wander around for a long time trying to figure out which way is up, and how do they move on. Well, when they die, they just wake up in that transition place. They don't have to migrate to get there. It's not like there's a journey they have to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, now the Bardo, right, says they have this journey, but that's not the way it is. You don't have a journey to take to get there. Your consciousness wakes up, and there you are, ready to plan and decompress. You may need time just to decompress, and you may take some time off to do that, but mostly that's not a problem, because that past life, however wonderful or however horrific it was, starts to fade. And very quickly, you don't really have much of a memory of it. It's just gone. So you don't have a lot of decompression time. You think you will because, oh, this life is so horrible, or I lived in horrible situations and I died a horrible death. That's going to take a lot of time. No, you wake up, you're in the transition reality, and you begin your transition. That's the way it is, and that past life just fades. Now, it may leave some scars on you, on your consciousness. You may be more frightened now than you were because you had a very frightened experience, but that's something then you have to deal with. You have to, evolve beyond that. So
I
we can
think,
evolve, but
sure. I think this person was thinking like, in rare instances, perhaps this is what you're speaking as a general, in rare instances where it was a very quick death, an explosion in war situations, in various war situations. I know we've talked about this before, that on rare occasions you do have to retrieve a, a soul, or is that an exercise for the person doing the retrieving? Is
Yes,
is it?
yes,
Okay.
indeed. Yes.
Well,
Okay. You just,
I was in France when I
yeah.
got a vision of a World War One soldier, and that was a headquarters for American soldiers
Hmm.
in World War One, or American or British, I think it was
Hmm.
American. But that's what came to me. And this person was visibly confused about what had happened. Now, that could be just a residual, it could have been true, but a residual
Hmm.
bit of energy that way
Well,
that did happen, but the soul isn't really
no.
stuck there. He's just
Right.
saying, this is what happened, pointing to this cannon or
That's, yeah,
thing like that.
that's no doubt part of the database, Donna.
Yeah.
When something horrific happens, right? You're in that instant, you have a what's happening, and then maybe a oh no, and then you're gone, then you die. Well, that sense of what's happening, oh no, is there, and now what am I going to do? And even for a very short time, when people kind of wake up, right? And it's a where am I? And it takes them a little while before they lose their memory of that previous life. It's not instantaneous. It doesn't just disappear in an instant or disappear the instant that they die. It takes a little while. It's like waking up with a dream. You wake up in a dream, and in the second you wake up, oh, the dream is very vivid and clear. And a minute later, it's kind of foggy. And 5 minutes later, you just remember the highlights. And a day later, I sort of remember a dream I had, and it was scary, but I don't really remember the details. It just goes away. So it's like that. So when you first kind of become aware you're not in this reality anymore, this physical reality, you're someplace else, there is a very short period of time. It's like, what's going on? Where am I? What happened? Oh, yeah, a big blast. Oh, okay. Is this a physical place? Am I lying in the mud someplace? No, I don't seem to be. Well, I'm not there anymore. And at about that time, as long as that takes what I just said, 10, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to kind of have those thoughts, then often uh, you'll get somebody to try to get your attention. Hello, over here, or the light at the end of the tunnel or whatever. But you don't really need to take a trip. That's just a transition scheme to help people, people who have lived within physical constraints. They don't think they can move unless they go someplace. I mean, they don't think they can get somewhere unless they have to travel, go someplace. It's just a belief they have. And they'll have that belief instantly because that's just where they came from for that next 30 seconds. So sometimes they have like move toward the light, and they'll be like they're going through a tunnel because the tunnel gives them something for relative motion to show itself. I'm moving because I see the tunnel walls going by, that kind of thing. So it's the way we interpret motion is we have to see something moving. So all of that is just happening in a very short period of time, but it's part of the record. It's part of what that consciousness is thinking. It's that last few seconds or the last minute or so of that free will awareness unit, because as soon as death starts, that free will awareness unit starts to be taken down. But it doesn't just be taken down instantly like an explosion. It's taken down over seconds or a minute. And during those seconds or a minute, you will find people, and they do seem kind of confused. Where am I? What's going on? But then they get collected very quickly. Oh, come over here, meet your friends, meet your relatives, and relax, let go. Everything's fine now, and they'll have that. And then by the time they go, oh yeah, I am. Everything's fine. Oh hi, Uncle Fred. Well, by then that past just the life they just had is kind of gone, kind of lost. So it doesn't take long for it to disappear, but you get a little of the confusion just for a little bit of time, and you can pick that up out of the database because that's real. But to think that there are lost souls out there who've been wandering around since World War II or World War I, we think that because we get that information. We think that information's current. We don't know that it comes out of a past database. So we think, well, they've been like that ever since World War I. Well, that's not the case. They haven't been like that ever since World War I. Now, what about these retrieval programs that you can get in? Monroe Institute has a retrieval program, and I think a lot of other places do too. It's kind of a thing to do when you're learning meditation and you're learning paranormal things, is you go take I think TMI calls theirs Lifelines course, and you go take these courses, and of course you find plenty of dead people who are confused and don't know how to get to the light, and you help them out. But that is a virtual reality game set up by the larger consciousness system for two reasons. One, it gives you something to do in the non-physical, some activity that you can put your focus on. Otherwise, it's like, well, okay, this is non-physical, so what? What do I do next? And by just giving you something to do is helpful. Now you can, the out of body is much easier because you can just focus on what you're doing. So it gives you something to do, which is a good training aid. But the storyline requires you to be compassionate. It requires you to care. It requires you to have empathy, to want to help, which are all positive growing things, you see. So it helps people make good choices like helping and caring and compassion. And it's a program to help people grow up and at the same time experience the larger, a reality other than this one, another virtual reality besides this one. So that Lifeline's virtual reality that's supported by the larger consciousness system is just another virtual reality that's full of dead people that need help. You see, and you go sign up for that, you take it and you find these dead people and you help them. And it helps you grow up. So it's a growing up tool. It's another virtual reality in which we grow up. And you say, oh, well, it's fake then. No, it's not fake then. You have to still make those choices. It is a virtual reality where you could say, well, I don't care. It's not my problem. Hey, tell me how you died. I think that'd be interesting, but I'm not interested in helping anybody. So you could do that. But the people that take the course go in with the idea, I want to help. I want to be of help. Give me something to do to be helpful. Well, they can be helpful doing that. Plus, they're spending time in the non-physical, getting used to that, building up their intuitive side of them, doing that. So it's a very positive, worthwhile thing. And if you take such a course, you should take it in all seriousness. It's the game. It's a virtual reality game you're playing. It's help the dead people get to the light game. And like any virtual reality, you should get into it and be it, do it.
Well, I suspect too, Tom, that experience is real, and it could be glimpses of what I got from a war 100 years ago. It could be the real moments of what happened when someone died, not necessarily in real time, because the reason I think that is that the emotions are very powerful.
Sure.
You're looking into this face of someone who's maybe 18 years old, and you're seeing that confusion, that isolation, that trauma. You're feeling all of that.
Right,
So I
exactly.
suspect it's a real tap into that.
Yeah, the data is there. That's real data out of a database. Okay. But the system needs to play that real data because otherwise it wouldn't be a very convincing virtual reality. Oh, over here, I'm a dead guy and I need your help. That would not be convincing. You have to see somebody who's distraught and confused and upset, and they can tell you about their life and who their mother and father were and how they got involved in the war. All that's coming right out of the database. The system's not making it up. It's not like the system just makes up dead people. This is all real stuff of real people who've had real experiences, and you're getting fed those real experiences from those real people. And it's a good way to develop your intuitive side, get used to exploring the other virtual reality systems, because everything you explore in consciousness is another virtual reality. So this is just one that's set up for you to explore, and it has characters in it and things. And yeah, that's you might say that the dead people are NPCs, but they're not just made up characters. They're characters out of the database, and they have lives, they have histories, they have things that happened to them. They can tell you how they got recruited to be a soldier, where they trained, how they felt. It's all there. It's a
real
really
information.
yeah, it's real information.
Yeah.
It's just not happening now. Which
Now,
is the
right.
assumption that we make. We make the assumption it's happening now, but it's a very valuable reality that you should take very seriously, and it's a good thing. It's not a fake thing. It's just like I say, if you travel around in consciousness and you have an experience in that consciousness, that is a virtual reality. All experience you have in consciousness is a virtual reality. It's information you get, and there are rules that set the context of that information, because information without any context doesn't mean anything. It's useless. You can't have information with no context. You don't know what to do with it. So you have to have context. And in that context is the rules for the virtual reality, and then you get the information. So any experience you have in consciousness is another virtual reality. So it's not like, oh, the fake ones are virtual realities and then there's a real one. No, there is no real one. Consciousness, communicates by exchanging information. Consciousness is an information system. So if you think that taking a course called retrievals is fake, well, then you should think that this reality is fake, and dreaming realities are fake, and every reality is fake, because they're all the same. You get information and you get situations in which you have to make choices, and you evolve or de-evolve by those choices. And you do that in this retrieval reality, just like you do it in this physical reality or in a dream reality or out-of-body reality. They're all the same. Why would anybody call one fake and the other one real? Only because they're prejudiced and don't understand the nature of reality. They're all real. It's all information. They're real choices you have to make. So
The question that followed up this question was, how would the free will awareness unit be returned to the IUOC? So does that take a bit of time?
Well, no, I think we've already said that. The free will awareness unit, the avatar dies, free will awareness unit starts to return, but that return process takes a minute, takes a few seconds, takes a minute or two. It kind of depends. If the person that died was obsessed with something, then it'll take a little longer. If they're not obsessed with something, then it'll take a little shorter. It'll be very quick. But if they have this huge obsession, just like if you have a dream and that dream is really something that's grabbed you, you'll remember it longer. It'll stick with you for a longer time. Okay. When you have out-of-body experiences, you remember those forever, because those are real experiences. But when you have a dream, you don't remember it forever. You remember that only for a while. It's got a perishable memory. That's kind of the difference between when you go to sleep, but then you have it out of body. Those are the ones that remain crystal clear. That really wasn't a dream. It was another experience of you connecting to another data stream in the virtual reality. The dreams fade and go away with time. Even the nightmares, they fade with time. The out of bodies, where you run into scary things, those don't fade generally. You hang on to those. So Any reality is one in which you get a data stream. You have choices in that data. That data stream creates a reality in which you have choices, and from those choices you evolve or de-evolve. And it doesn't matter whether it's a retrieval, virtual reality, or whether it's called the physical universe, or whether it's a dream reality. None of that makes any difference. They're all equally real. They're all equally functional. There isn't fake ones and real ones. That's just your prejudice and your lack of understanding. So sure, you take it seriously. If you go enroll in a retrieval course, then you should take it as seriously as you take life here. And you should take life here very seriously. Some people say, oh, this is a virtual reality. Well, then it doesn't matter what I do. I can do anything. Wrong. It matters very much what you do. Your choices you make, which is what you do, determine whether you evolve or de-evolve. Not serious business. That's what you're here for. So all of these realities are significant, and they're all equally significant.
So choices matter everywhere, every time,
Uh,
at any time, and all the time.
yes,
All right.
exactly true.